Good evening. Welcome to the Couch Conversations. This year theme is Black to the Past, and we are delighted to have this conversation as we think about not just the past, but where are we going in the future? Justice coded or bias rebooted? That is the question that we are asking today. So, as we think about this question, particularly the issue that everyone is talking about is AI. AI is rapidly reshaping our entire world. It's reshaping our politics, it's reshaping education, health, everything that we touch. And we couldn't be luckier to have the world-renowned Dr. Howard here to talk to us about AI. Help us understand, what is it? What should we pay attention to, and why should we pay attention to this? Dr. Howard is a world-renowned leader in artificial intelligence, robotics, and ethical tech. She currently serves as the Dean of College of Engineering at The Ohio State, making history as the first Black woman to lead a U.S. College of Engineering. Her career spans, I'm not going to tell you how many years, but many years, including roles at NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, co-founder and former CTO of Zyrobotics, and a fierce advocate for inclusive innovation. She has authored over 250 peer-reviewed publications and received numerous accolades, including being named Forbes top 50 women in tech, and is a sought-after speaker. I can't even believe she made time for us. I'm just so delighted to welcome Dr. Howard.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited about this conversation.
Great. I want to get right into it. Actually, I'm so excited. I skipped right over my sponsors because I want to talk about this. We'll get to them later on. So, the thing is, what is AI? I mean, it's a big term. It means everything and nothing. Can you share with us, what is AI and the tiers
Yes.
of AI?
Yeah. So artificial intelligence, AI, is really an umbrella term, and it means basically an algorithm that does something. That's really what it means. And so it really is everything from, if you have an algorithm that can identify your text and decode it, it may not be intelligent. So an algorithm doesn't necessarily mean it's intelligent. And so the levels of artificial intelligence, there are things that are more specialized artificial intelligence, what are niche. It's a AI agent that does something very specific, a chatbot, for example. And there's learning agents that learn your habits. Google Nest, as an example, it can figure out when it should cut on the heat and at what rate. And so this is all the way to very intense, what we call deep learning. So deep learning is using all the data that's out there, whether it's in social media, whether it's your X, your Facebook feed, your Fitbits, your watches, and taking that to have insights to then do something interesting. And a lot of the things that people think about around artificial intelligence is that last part. It's the deep learning, it's the large language models, it's the chat GPTs or the BARDs. That's what most people think about when they think about AI.
You're so right. I never thought about all of that other stuff as AI, right? Siri, turn on the heat. Siri, do this. I think we've only got into this conversation or started having this conversation when it started impacting our lives, right? When people start thinking, wait a minute, how is this going to impact my health? How will this impact my education? Wait a minute, am I going to lose my job? What's going to happen? And so I really like the fact that you broke that down. So AI can be all, as we've been on the path of AI actually for a very long time, is what you're
Yes,
saying.
we have. And so what's interesting is that if you go out in the world, i.e., you're not a hermit and you are basically in bed all day, you will impact on average at the minimum 10 applications that are using artificial intelligence today.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people don't even realize this. If you have a smartphone, that increases to probably about 20 type of applications. If you use email, if you do text, if you do anything related to the world, you are interacting with some type of artificial intelligence. We don't think about it because we just think of it as a function. Oh, this makes sense. This actually works. I cut on my car. All right. It works. It's cruise control. where there's actually data that's been designed into making your car more efficient, emissions. So it's everywhere.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about the everywhere, because everywhere now means it's personal. And when it becomes personal, particularly for people that look like me, now I have to think about ethics, right? I have to think about it as a feature, not just a feature, but somebody is determining something about us somewhere. So, how is AI like, how are we thinking about justice or compliance in AI if it's everywhere?
So I think when we think about AI and its applications, we really do want it to enhance our functionality. And so we don't think about our phone being an AI agent. Where we're concerned about AI is when it impacts the things that we consider fundamental rights, things around health, things around workforce, things around elements of education, those things that we think of as fundamental rights, that there should be some equalization across the board. And so when AI is involved in decision making, then we become very, very concerned.
Mhm.
But the same tools that allow us to, say, connect with someone on our webinar are the same tools that can then be used in terms of facial recognition in predictive policing. And so it's not the methodology that necessarily changes, it's the application.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, this application piece, right? Because that's where we start becoming concerned. One of the things that I read about and just came out a few weeks ago was the big beautiful bill, right? Came out. And one of the requests in the big beautiful bill was no regulation on AI for the next 10 years. I got to tell you, for me, that felt a little dangerous. That felt a little like, wait a minute, what should I be thinking about? So if this passes, that there's a moratorium on regulations, what does equity look like? What should investors be thinking about? What should we think about as we try to make sure that we're not rebooting biases that are out there, but we're really using this to code a better world, more justice for all of us.
Yeah, so this is this grayscale and the nuance of what this means. So most states have some form of bill either passed or being legislators around artificial intelligence. California has a number of them as well as New York, but pretty much all of the states in the United States. And everyone is different and unique, primarily because the federal government hasn't established regulations that covers the entire nation. And so the stoppage around regulations is really to say, states, you need a pause for 10 years. And so the reason why is not around, oh, we want bad AI. The reason why is because it's competition. So we have state actors, we have other nations that are investing in AI startups, investing in AI for their citizens, and they have no rules. And so one concept is how do we protect ourselves as a nation against these other nations that have no rules and regulations? Right. So that's really the element is we can't hamper innovation, and so therefore we don't have regulations. The problem, though, is that there is still some elements of bias in these tools. And it's not just about the data, it's about how the algorithms are developed, it's about how you look at the outcomes. And so, what regulations allow you to do is really ensure that there are some safeguards around what you can and what you can't do, and how you put these and deploy them in our real world and in society. I've been talking about pro regulations for now probably about 10 years. And so little movements, and now this is a backtrack. But one of the things that the bill does not necessarily emphasize is the fact that local communities, cities, municipalities, they still have a right to enact their own rules and regulations. And so I think about, well, how do we get advocacy groups? How do we get organizations such as the ACLU work with local legislatures, work with the mayors and the local states in order to say, okay, well, maybe the state can't do anything, but in our large city of Chicago or New York, this is how we are going to operate. This is how we're going to think about our police force. This is how we're going to think about our judges. It's not the best, but it's at least something that we can do. And then the other thing is that there are still some regulations that are out in the world, for example, in the UK. Well, if companies want to operate, they have to be international, they have to be global, which means that they have to also comply with these regulations, even if it's not in the United States. And so companies will still adapt. There might not be anything in the United States, but if they want to sell to folks in Sweden, they want to sell to folks in Germany, they're going to have to adapt. And so we might get some benefit from that.
You've said a lot here, and one of the things I want to talk about a little bit more is your point on you've been at this for 10 years, right?
But
And
just the regulations.
on the regulation, that's my point. On
Yes.
the regulations part, you've been at this for 10 years. Um, so 10 years ago, where were we? And now, what should we consider? So we have on this call philanthropists, we have policymakers, we have a lot of people on this call that can do many of the things that you're stating. Can you break this down just a little bit more, especially here in Massachusetts, right? That's where we're headquartered. So, what should Massachusetts, Ohio, Virginia, New York, what should we be thinking about? And what are a few things that we can think about doing now?
Oh, so one of the things, at least in the United States, that we do have we believe in is the freedom of speech, freedom of activism, freedom of grassroots efforts, right? And so traditionally, if you look at our history, when something was wrong, our
Mm,
community was wronged, we would have individuals that would commune and get together, community-based efforts, and laws were changed, communities were benefited. I don't think we have to do anything different than what we have. It's in our DNA. But I think as nonprofits, as community foundations, as those that are out there, one is educate yourself around this. It's not just about the large headlines. It's not just about, say, court systems or predictive policing. It is about the workforce. It is about health. It is about education. It's about emissions. All those little things that you're like, oh, but that's such a little thing, the little things will creep up and they'll impact. I mentioned that the AI algorithms are the same across the board. It's just the applications. And so if we're not saying something about the small things, it can easily creep into the large things that then people are concerned about. But I would say that it might be too late. So one, educate yourself around what is there in AI? What are the applications currently? What are companies thinking about when they say ethical responsibility in AI? And advocate for what we need in terms of the changes and the laws and the regulations at a local level.
mm. And when you say advocate, I have to admit, before our conversation with you, I saw AI through this very narrow sphere, right? And now, even here, or even in looking through articles or information to prepare for this, not only is it everywhere and everything, we know so little. We are just taking these tools, and it's like a new dress that we're just trying on, having no idea what the material is, the seams are, any of it. How do people start to even educate themselves? And I'm just going to speak from the philanthropic point of view. Philanthropy spends very little money in this area, even helping people have software. So you want people to educate themselves, but where do we start?
Well, one, I try to think about educating is I'm a practitioner, so I'm an engineer, I'm a computer scientist. I learn by doing, and
Mhm.
so one very simple task is to think about your functions, whether it's HR, whether it's proposal writing, whether it's financials, budgets, taxes, and actually say, can I do this? Taxes, 990s. With AI, actually, the answer is yes, and it's pretty good.
The answer is yes.
It is. So it's just like take something and just say, you know what? I'm going to practice by doing. I'm just going to figure it out. I'm going to get frustrating because I'm not quite sure how to work it, but just be okay with like, let's do this. And every time you take an application and try something new with a new AI tool, you'll become more and more comfortable. It'll also show you where it makes mistakes. As you get comfortable, you're like, oh, you know what? It's great at this. It really is bad at this other function. It allows you to then become an expert around the AI tools and the biases, the mistakes, and also what it's good for, which it is. It does have some positive attributes.
But as you're saying that, right, you just mentioned 10 jobs, right? I don't care if you are the person that is doing the bookkeeping, whether you're writing a proposal, whether you're the person that is just answering the phone, right? AI can do all of that. We just heard, well, I recently heard a quote, or it was on television, right? And it was at the recent AI factory partnership between Dell and NVIDIA,
NVIDIA. Hmm.
which aims to generate, intelligence as a scalable product. So
Hmm.
potentially replacing human labor. How do you see this shift impacting our communities? When I think of our communities, I'm going to go right there, Black communities, because if it impacts us, it's going to impact everyone, particularly in terms of employment, economic mobility, and the ongoing fight for equity and white collar jobs, even. So I love your idea of like, pick it up, play it out, see what happens. But what happens? What is the other side of that? And what safeguards or strategies do you think we need to put in place before not only does AI, I'm going to say for philanthropy, write the proposal, it completes the proposal, it
And
then
submits it.
submits it, but also determines on the other side, maybe you only should get this amount of money and gives it back to the person. Like, those things, you're right, can be automated. That's a brand new world. So can it replace us?
So our job functions, and I would say every single job function we have will either be changed, altered, or eliminated. But there's still something very special about people. And I think one of the things is how do you identify your talents and your skills to figure out where your special place is, your special skill is? Because AI is not perfect with everything. It still fails at anomalies, i.e., tasks that aren't repetitive, it doesn't do well at because it doesn't have enough data to learn because it's only seen it once. Things that are very human to human interactive, it doesn't do as well because there's something really strange and really weird about human human interaction when it comes to things like empathy, touch. AI doesn't do well. But it's really identifying and being honest with oneself to say, what am I doing? What can I do better that AI can't do? And I will tell you, believe it or not, the trades are one of the areas that is least impacted today. One day we will have physical robots, but we're still a little far from that. But the trades, I want to hire a plumber. Now, plumbing is going to change because you might have an AI assistant that says, oh, this is the part that you would need. This is how you put it together. Maybe you should check this or this or this, right? So you now have your personal assistant as a plumber, but to actually do the job and say, well, that didn't quite work. Well, let me try another path. Okay, what else can I try? Well, what if I tell you this? Like this interactive. And so, one, trade jobs will still exist. They'll be transformed because you will have AI to engage. And so, really, the types of jobs that will be out there will be this hybrid. There will be AI plus humans. And it's really our focus and our, I would say, as nonprofits, teaching the community how to work with AI, teaching them the skill set that is necessary and getting them to be comfortable. because it impacts Black and Brown communities, it impacts different in terms of social economics. But I will say it's even larger than that because the developers, the ones that are in the AI communities, the ones that are tech savvy, we kind of know what it's going to look like, what kind of jobs are going to be. I think the rest of the world doesn't. And so as nonprofit, we can get in front of that in our communities and actually start teaching and start training about one, being comfortable with AI and redefining your job so that it's a hybrid type of job.
That's fascinating. I read an article in McKinsey that was talking about this notion of AI resistant jobs, people who are caring for each other, right? And they mentioned that exactly. So people who, they were a little iffy on the plumber side because well, I'll tell you why, because the thought was as the tools become more machinery, automated, your toilet, all of that, right? That the diagnosis might be a little different. So to your point, is AI assistant. So as I'm thinking about AI assistant, how do you, particularly for our youngest, how do you start teaching this? How does AI come into, I don't know, the classroom? What is it that children should be learning? Or what are the 3 or 4 concepts that every child in a public school or any school should be learning now? And what's at stake if we delay?
Yeah, so I think AI literacy and associated with that is computing skills should be fundamental. So just like we teach students to read, we teach kids to read from, third grade onward. We teach basic math from very early on. We need to teach this element of what I call AI literacy, i.e., how do you use the tools that are out there? And it could be things like ChatGPT or Copilot. Like, how do you use these as tools? Have so much more ability than just writing. They
Hmm.
can teach you how to code. They can teach you how to really focus your critical thinking skills. They can teach you about science. I don't think we have the infrastructure yet in terms of teaching teachers how to teach with AI, but that is starting to evolve. That is starting to come. I think as a parent, we can try to use these tools ourselves, try to get comfortable with some basic things like, I have to cook dinner for my family. What should I cook? Here are my ingredients. And just starting to get used to, like, oh, well, this is quite interesting. I actually get a response that's pretty good.
I think that's fascinating, right? As a mother of a child in middle school, um, I think the teachers are afraid. And I think there's this fear that children will not learn in the traditional way, or even it may even change the way that their brain is working. One teacher of my child said, um, they are discouraging kind of using ChatGPT because they want to make sure that your brain can function. And this in the early ages when you have more plasticity, I think, of the brain. I'm not a neurosurgeon here, so I'm quickly going out of my element, but you're training your brain to think. You're training your brain to come up with new concepts. So your point is maybe, maybe not. Maybe this is a good time to introduce AI. And if so, how are we training teachers to think about this?
Well, I always think about, so I am an educator, and I always think about how when new technologies comes to the educational ecosystem, there's always this apprehension and well, they're not going to teach, they're not going to learn the way we did. Calculators, for those of you who are out there, when calculators first came, they were banned from the classroom. When laptops first came, they were banned from the classroom. When Wikipedia first existed, it was banned from you. Wikipedia, that's cheating. Like, I remember these scenarios, but we've adapted as teachers, as educators around, okay, how do we then carve our learning? How do we carve the way we teach so that we are providing the ability to think intelligently, think critically, start to poke at it, but we also understand that these are tools. And so AI is a tool, but if we ban it from the classroom and we don't teach how to use it responsibly, They're going to learn how to use it irresponsibly on their own. They're going to figure it out on their own. They're going to say, well, I can't use it in the classroom, but I'm going to use it. I'm going to hide it and I'm going to cheat. And then they have this concept then of like, I'm cheating, but I'm getting away with it.
Mm.
Whereas if you embrace it to say, look, you can use AI, it's as a tool. These are the parameters of how you use it. And then I'm going to craft your arguments. I'm going to craft your assignments so that I'm making you think about it. As an example, say I want to have critical thinking about research. And so I want you to, figure out how the earth was created or formed. So my assignment might be I want you to ask 3 versions of the tools that are out there, the question about how Earth is formed. Then I want you to examine it and figure out where it's wrong. Because there's going to be some fact that's wrong. Maybe it's the year, maybe it's the scientists that were involved, maybe they missed or omitted some information. Right. So that's an area of, okay, now you have someone and they're having to examine in 3 different versions. And wait, hold it. They're slightly different, but they're kind of the same. Where's the commonality? Well, these things are different. Well, which one is true? So now I've given a child the ability to start questioning the AI, but also understand the impact and the value.
That's fascinating to me on so many levels because what you're doing is actually elevating critical thinking, right? So
Correct.
what we're removing is the whole rote learning, right? So now I'm okay with this. I'm down with this, right? Where I get murky, right, is where AI, my child is believing, okay, I'm looking at these three things, but they may be biased or have stereotypes in them, right? Or it may be perpetuating the things that we are trying to move away from. How do we, in a system that increasingly is influencing decisions and critical thinking, like education, when we're going to talk about healthcare in a little bit, how do we confront this? Let's say the information is wrong, right? What do we do?
Well, so
And
one,
where are those areas to poke? I want to poke.
so so interesting enough, there is bias in these tools, and
Right.
the biases are different depending on the tool. Right? And so one element is that you do a comparison. But I'm also of the belief of AI has learned from historical information. So when books get eradicated and destroyed and burned, it's going to be really, really difficult to eradicate all of that knowledge in the AI. And so when I think about the repository of information, I'm actually more confident that it will be present in these tools that have a historic history of all the things that have happened, whether we believe them or not, versus the current where there are countries where there are some books that are banned. In our country, there are some states where they're banning certain books, changing the narrative. But AI is very difficult to do that. But the bias, if people believe it and they're only using one tool, they can then change, they then have this reference that may be untrue or might be biased themselves. And I think that's really where nonprofit and organizations and civil rights groups have a say is they should be probing. They should be what we call auditing these tools. They should be saying, what happens if we talk about the history of the civil rights? What happens if we talk about the history of slavery? What happens? What is the narrative? And if it's right or wrong, basically say if it's wrong, it's like, okay, we need to ensure that this gets changed or the community gets changed. The other thing is there are startups that are focused on at least retaining Black and Brown history. Lattimore AI is an example where they are curating this information so that even if other tools are making certain things disappear, there are still other avenues, other tools that are maintaining some elements of history, culture, things that exist.
I'm very interested in that, and particularly the work that we do are giving Black reports, right? That there's this whole historical narrative. And one of those places that surprisingly, we got a lot of information was actually from the federal government themselves, right? And whether it was the Smithsonian in our libraries there, whether it was I can't think of their name, but there was all this amazing history, our history that was online that was removed. So as you put it, as we now think of AI as being a repository, an interesting repository, right? And is holding a lot of information. I don't want to throw cold water on that. What does that mean for my health? Right? So if I have my private information out there, like in healthcare, right? We know that you were in the film Superhuman Bodies. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, it was about robots and how it empowers children with disabilities and promoting personalized care and interaction, right? And I thought, oh my God, that's fabulous. And then I started thinking, okay, what if that was personally me, right? How much information do I want out there? And I know that there are articles that are being written about digital health and AI and how federated learning and edge AI are critical to maintaining privacy on the collection of large scale real world evidence from digital devices. So, phones, all these things that have my information, like what you beautifully illustrated, could be a repository for good. What happens with my privacy? What happens with my private information? And how do I start creating these walls or places and spaces that some things I want out there and out there forever, and other things not so much? How do we handle that?
Yeah, and so this is again a grayscale. Every technology since the dawn of people is what we call dual use.
Mhm.
You have a car. A car is so lovely. It gets you from place A to place B. People have used cars to kill people, right? And so every single technology has a positive and a negative use. And so when I think about healthcare, you can take personalized data, my data. It means I can customize medication. Just as you know, now, if you have a diagnosis of something, you go to the doctor, they prescribe, and you have to give your vitals, and they're like, "Oh, we need to make it a little less. We need to make." It's basically it's an art form because we're all slightly different.
Mhm.
Imagine that I come, all the data that's collected, and you know exactly what medication, what the dosage is, how long you need to take it for. If you have cancer, what is the radiation? I mean, it's designed especially for you. It means that a lot of the times our trials don't have representation across demographics, across race, ethnicity, socioeconomics. Now it would. So that's the positive. The negative is, well, that information could also then maybe say create a targeted virus. I could
Mm.
say, oh, I don't like that person. I don't like Dr. Howard. We're going to create a targeted virus that's going to take her out. Right. And so that's the positive and the negatives, which is also why I so believe in regulations, because then at least we can minimize or mitigate some of the negative. But I think this is this element of a choice because if you want the value of the positive, if you want the value of it being personalized, you do have to give up a little bit of your privacy. And so this is this whole balance. There are algorithms currently that are being developed that are called privacy preserving, which basically means that if I give up my data, personalized data in health and education, really doesn't matter. The AI can create a personalized version of it, but it can't share it with other people,
Mm.
right? So the AI knows everything about me. It gives me my correct outcomes, correct decisions, but it itself is not taking that data and sharing it with the companies or sharing it with a bad actor. Um, how do we get to that place where companies are adopting that? We're not there, but the algorithms are being developed to do just that.
Mm. Another place I think about this is in law. As you were saying, think about your job. Can I do it better with AI? What part of this can I do with AI? Um, Justice comes into play, right? My lovely husband is an attorney, was an attorney, now a judge. And as I was thinking about his work, I just thought, his work is going to be AI proof, right? At least one of us will have a job. Well, I don't like the fact
Nope.
you're shaking your head, but you're right. So I was reading, it was an article, right? A Yale article stated that some fear that the increased reliance on AI will lead to one or two tiered systems. And I hadn't thought about it that way because I really did think my husband, he's going to help me out. He's going to take care of me forever. Maybe not. People experiencing poverty may be stuck with an inferior AI-driven assistance. Only expensive law firms might be able to harness legal AI effectively. And another impact could be that when people can't afford any legal assistance, right? It's not just driven, that's what you're going to be given. Is that how is this possible? Could this really come to bear? And how might an increase on reliance on AI in the legal system not just exacerbate, but really hone in on this part that we're asking, is this going to be bias rebooted, like with an exponent? And what are some of the concerns? What can we do? I know you've talked about the fact that nonprofits can look and poke, but how do we truly, from this conversation, take on the whatever tools necessary to ensure that we're not creating a two-tiered system, a system that people can afford and get the best of AI, and a system that maybe you can't afford and you're just getting the leftovers.
So, there will be a two-tier system, but I would say what we have now is worse, right? If I can afford the highest priced lawyer, the tools they have are people.
That's true.
So now, even the lower priced lawyers, the nonprofits could actually have their own AI lawyer and provide services to the community, right?
So
And so
more service
now the support services, they
and
don't have
more.
to hire a high priced lawyer or have a lawyer on house. They can have a fresh lawyer just out of law school that has the wealth of an AI assistant, 5 or 6 other lawyers that are helping that human, helping that lawyer person.
Listen, don't tell the state that. They may start they may start their own AI factory of lawyers.
Well, but I think that it. And so what happens is you still will have a two-tier system because you will still have high-priced lawyers that will buy and purchase the higher price AI tools. But it also means that when we have public defenders, like public defenders will be able to get as much of the tools as they can as the high-priced lawyers. And so now even public defenders, you come in, they are overworked, too many cases. Well, now we can alleviate some of that by having an AI lawyer, an AI system that does some of the grunt work that is needed for basically being effective for your client. So I actually think that it moves us into a positive space. There still will be a two-tier system. There is now. I think we have more disparities now than we could if we do this right.
You've said so many things that is really, I have to say, having me think differently about AI as justice, right? Leaning more on the justice side, that information is shared more freely, skills are shared more freely, and more equitably. Am I saying this right? Could be more
Correct.
equitable, maybe.
But we have to be active. So this is the thing. The things I'm mentioning require us to be active, not passive. All these things just don't happen. So, AI lawyers for justice, they're not going to exist unless there's a need. And if people aren't
And
asking for it, go on.
and the right person putting the information in,
Correct. Correct.
right?
But it's not a passive activity. Like I'm a tech optimist, but tech optimism only works if people are still doing good. And so we need nonprofits, we need people to still do good in order to ensure that we have a future where AI does provide more benefits. We still have our societal issues. I mean, societal issues are because of people, and as long as people exist, we'll have those. But I think if we're intentional on embracing the positive elements of AI, we can actually create a more just system.
I know we have a couple of questions and they're going to come in to me shortly. Actually, they're here. Uh, Thank you for this chat. Much of the narrative around AI and jobs focus on upscaling, but are we asking the right questions about ownership of AI systems and economic power? Um, and then followed by how do people of color move beyond the restraints and being retrained to being equity holders, not restraint, but retrain, because retraining is constantly what we're hearing. But I like some of the things that you talked about with children, but I do want to go to this issue of AI and jobs focus have been focused on upskilling, but are we asking the right questions about ownership of AI systems and economic power? What's your thought?
No, we're not asking the right questions, but the fact is we live in the United States. And so it really is, we are driven by the economics of, I would say, big businesses, companies. And so as long as I always say as consumers, as long as we're feeding into this element of I need the best, I need the greatest, I need the clothes, I need the cars, there's this narrative around you got to make money, you got to make money, you got to make money. Companies have to make money because they have shareholders. Shareholders expect their companies to increase their profit. Increasing profit means that if I can get rid of as many humans as possible and replace them, I increase the profit. But some of this narrative is because we are fiending for it. And so, what can we do as a community to be better? I actually love the fact that we had this boycott of, I believe it was it Target?
Mhm.
Um, like you actually saw a decrease in their profit margin. Like, how did that happen? If you think about in the past, we've had boycotts against certain companies that didn't have the right value system or were losing their morals. We have to do more of that because we're losing the narrative. And the upskilling and the retraining is because companies are moving in this way, and we're trying to figure out how do we keep a piece of the pie. We need to change the conversation about what that pie means.
Mm. And I think you're absolutely right there. But in thinking about what the pie means, how do we ensure that the pie becomes more equitable? I think we've all been trained in this very Western way of thinking about the pie, right? To your point, not just the best at the cheapest price, right? So
Yes.
AI is like, great, we're pennies on a dollar here. I got you. You no longer have to pay X amount of dollars. It's here. How will AI, you think, reshape our value system?
So the way thinking about the value system, about what is, cheap versus an asset. I think one of the things we need to do is start to think of AI as, how do I say it? Think of it as another, I won't say a human or a person, but think of it as if a company hires an AI and fires a human, what do? You need to tax the AI, right? Like, I mean, we need to think about this. We have people who work, they need benefits, they pay taxes, but all of these are expenses. An AI comes in, you just purchase it once and you're done. Or you purchase a license, but you're paying another company. Well, if an AI is doing the same thing as a human, why aren't we taxing it? Or why aren't we taking the cost of benefits and applying it to do a retraining, doing schooling, doing XYZ? We're not having those type of conversations. We think of it as basically a positive, i.e., positive for AI, negative for human, but we're not thinking about, well, maybe we need to recast the conversation about AI as if we're losing something in terms of human value, those humans at some point aren't going to pay taxes, which means at some point you're not going to have buyers, you're not going to have purchases for your product. And so think of it more holistically. Those conversations are only starting with like universal basic income is an example of why those types of conversations are starting to have more of a voice.
Hmm. You raise a really good point because it's really part of the system. It's not just a tool for that a singular tool, but how is it impacting the entire system? Another question came in. How concerned should we be regarding the issue of deep fakes? And what policies should we be advocating for to address the blurring of reality that AI is fostering? But let's go with the deep fakes first. Like, what is a deep fake? So we're all
Yes.
with the same definition. And then what should we be concerned about? And particularly with AI.
Yeah, so deep fakes is an AI that imitates either your voice, your presence uh, through video, your text through writing. So basically, it's imitating someone who exists through your data, but it's not them. So I can take a video of me talking and take my voice and replace the words that I'm saying, but also change and warp my mouth so the words actually are correlated with the way my mouth moves and my head moves. So deepfakes are a serious problem, mainly because people get fooled by them, right? So
Mm.
if they were fake, you'd be like, oh, that's fake. But a lot of times we're getting fooled by them. And there's things you can look for in a deep fake to be like, oh, that's actually not real. But as people and as humans, we don't, one, some of us don't care. And the ones that do care are like, oh, but this is funny. I'm going to post it. I'm going to retweet, re-exit. So that it is a problem. So thinking about what is it that we can do or you can do. One is don't believe everything that you hear, read, or see. Like we should start defaulting to that. We're
Mm.
really good around cyber, right? Like if someone says, "Hey, I'm in jail. I need $200. Please send it to this." We've gotten better, right, at like not doing that. We need to do the
Some of
same
us.
with deepfake. Some of us, but some still give away their $200. So we need to train ourselves of how to not always believe video, voice, or text. So
Mm.
that's a personal one. And we can train our community to do that. The other thing is in the United States, we have the one thing that is not impacted yet is lawsuits, right? Like a lot of times, even if the regulations don't happen, we have organizations, nonprofits, as well as advocacy groups that say, you know what? We are just going to sue the companies so that they do right. And now you're talking about you're hitting someone's pocket, which again, that's part of our ecosystem. You want to maximize profits, minimize expenses. A lawsuit is very, very expensive. And so we can use the things that we have, the tools that we have to say, well, a class action lawsuit is a thing. Companies have changed their entire product lines on class action lawsuits because a large enough amount of people have been impacted negatively.
We didn't discuss this earlier, but this issue of deep fakes came up, it made me think about, I don't know if you've heard of the gentleman, well, I don't know if you've heard of Cameron James Wilson, who created a model. And that's why I went like this, right? He's a white man from London, he created what he thought was the most beautiful woman on earth. Turns out she's a dark black woman. He's praised everywhere for it and then received a lot of blowback on the fact that you're profiting. You created through AI a black woman. Now you're profiting from this black woman you've created because you're selling her as a model. And she is gorgeous. So he went back and created a whole group of people, right? The digitals, I think they're called, and they're all models. I probably would get in trouble for saying it's like a plantation of models, right? That he can sell out and bring back. And the thing that I thought was fascinating, the people who are doing business with him are all the luxury companies. So these fakes, they look real. They move
Mhm.
real. You think you're looking at a person. They are deep fake. Um, about as deep as you go as impersonating a human being. So, going back to your point on the do you tax it? Companies are, uh, you know, they're looking more and more real. What exactly am I looking for in a fake? If I see it, how are they legal? Are they not legal? Like, we're getting into your grayscale, so to speak. And so what do we do? Because I feel like as my child is growing up with fake people, real people, what are we putting in place to going back to this issue of regulation to regulate this?
There is no regulations on this, and there has been conversations in the past, like a couple of months ago, around how do you basically penalize or punish someone for, say, doing a deep fake. And so there's some elements of if I create a deep fake of someone else and it's in the pornography phrase, then there's some laws that you can have. Like someone can't just take your picture and post it online. There's some rules and regulations on doing that. Can we put the deep fakes in that category? But there's some very strict guidelines of when it's illegal. But if I just deep fake you and just put it out and put it on X and it's like, "Ooh, it's fun. I'm imitating you." You're not you might even be a public figure. Well, is that open and fair use? It's unclear. And we don't have the laws have not caught up to this. And so it's an ongoing conversation. But in order to determine what's deep fake or not, one is pause, don't believe everything you see. And then you can actually do a couple of courses. So there's some courses, some exercise around how do you identify deep fakes. There's certain things around how in a video, how things flow. There's always some anomaly that's a little bit different, that's a little off. Perfection, humans aren't perfect. And so if you see perfection, like, oh my gosh, that is like perfect, it's like, wait, hold it. As humans, your eyes are slightly misaligned. You're like, this is the beauty of being human is that we are actually imperfect. So you can take lessons and actually have some practice on recognizing deep fakes in the now, because of course things continue to improve.
We have another question that came in. Are you aware of people building cross-sector coalitions or coalition between policy advocates, grassroots organizer, technologists to ensure that people are not simply protected, to ensure that people are not just simply protected from AI harm, but actually doing some of the things you're thinking about moving forward to create gateways for the future, coded justice gateways. Who's doing that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of organizations that are trying to push that forward. So one is called the Algorithmic Justice League,
Mhm.
um, and the founder,
Joy?
actually has a movie called Coded Bias.
That's Joy.
And yes, yes, and so her focus is on bringing groups together and addressing some of these things that are out there and calling attention to it. And so there are a couple. There's one that's AI Now. In fact, I believe is out of New York that does some of the same things, writes reports, tries to advocate, bring people together, link it with grassroots. And so there's these, I would say, elements and pillars that are in the United States that are doing this. Is it enough? I think everyone needs to get involved for it to be enough.
I have to tell you, I've been with you, had wine with you. I have never been more fired up on this issue as I am tonight. And I think there's a lot that each and every one of us individually and collectively can do if we just sat down and thought about it a little bit more and not just be passive receivers of this, but an active player. So you've done a lot of things. You were at NASA. You were in part of you. You were in the movie. You have created curriculums. You were the founder of Zybotics. So as you reflect on AI's ever, ever evolving role in society. You know, academics now, you're seeing more young people come into your classroom. What personal evolution in your thinking has surprised you the most about AI? And what would you offer as like closing thoughts on what we should think about for the future?
So the thing I always say now is with AI is the cat is out the bag, the train has left the station. It's not just a train, it's the bullet train has left the station. And instead of having the narrative of how do we stop this, it's about how do we participate in ensuring that it evolves and grows to what we know it could be. Again, I'm a tech optimist because the thing is that this is happening, and if we are in a denial stage, it'll leave without us. And so how do we become part of the conversation? How do we craft what's being developed? How do we think about AI for healthcare, AI for education, AI for workforce, and having a seat at that table because it's still growing, it's still moving, it's still learning. It hasn't got to the end. So that was the time. Um, what I worry about, just from my own personal perspective, is that the acceleration has increased beyond my imagination. Every year, I see us adopting more tools. I see more development. I see more things that are like, oh, wow, I remember that 20 years ago. How is it that everyone now knows about it and is using it? It's an acceleration that I would say is a little terrifying. Um, that has surprised me. And so this is why I'm really adamant about everyone needs to figure this out and get on the train in order to ensure that at least we steer it in the right direction.
Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you so much for moving us from this gloom and doom space that we've been in to really thinking about this being an opportunity that we can all individually or collectively code justice, right? We can influence this conversation. We can influence this history. And I'm so delighted we've been able to have this conversation. This hour went by so quick. I have so many other questions that we may tap into you once again, but really from the bottom of my heart, thank you so, so, so much. You've given me personally so many ideas that I can do with my family. And I'm sure even our organization, how can we be on the forefront of this and shaping this? Because I love your point. It's going to be hard to erase this. You can't burn down AI. What we can do is increase our influence, increase the narrative about the assets of our community and our history. Thank you so much, Dr. Howard.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
And I look forward to talking to you soon. Well, we have reached that time. It is 7 o'clock. I cannot believe how fast that hour has flown. Thank you so much for being with us. We're so delighted that you could join us for this bit of time. We're thankful to our sponsors that have sponsored this program from the very beginning, the Astor Foundation, Barr Foundation, the Terry and Brad Bloom Foundation Endowment for Health, Fidelity, Charitable Catalyst Fund, Eastern Bank, Patriots Foundation, Greater Cincinnati Foundation, Liberty Mutual, and TJX, and most importantly, our Kellogg Foundation. Thank you for the sponsoring of this program. But most of all, thank you for each and every one of you. From the small sponsor, for the small donations that we receive to the large sponsorships. It takes a lot to run these programs and to make sure that we can bring this information to you. And from the bottom of our hearts, we say thank you and good night.